Okay, so hopefully this time this is actually going to record. I'm having some kind of difficulty where either I'm too stupid to figure out how to use the webcam, or the webcam has lost its mind. So, I wanted to have a quick discussion about being biracial in America for the few people that are outside of a few large urban areas. I grew up mostly in the suburbs. When I lived in the U.S., I actually did not grow up in the U.S. I moved there from the Bahamas, British Virgin Islands, when I was about 12, possibly maybe a little later than that. I had not even experienced racism. I had no idea what racism was. I have experienced everything from, as I said, the white spectrum of having been called straight up nigger to the black end of colorism. Um, it has been extreme and intense, and it affected everything from my dating life to my friendships. I had black and white friends, acted differently when I was with them, and essentially had to kind of develop two different personalities. It's only been since leaving the U.S. when I graduated university and went to London that I saw that it wasn't me that was messed up. It was the environment that I had been in, because I had left the Bahamas like 15 years earlier. I had had massive problems growing up, didn't date, didn't have boyfriends. People think race and skin color is really what it's all about. What it's about is who raises you and how you're acculturated. That's what matters. And most of my friends, my father's job kept us in areas that were suburban, kind of upper middle class. Most of my friends were white until I went to university, until I kind of struck out on my own. And I can remember very clearly in the university one day talking to a white guy and having a black guy come up and stand directly between us and say, "What do you think you're doing talking to this white boy?" And what do you do? What do you say? So loads of colorism, loads of being assumed to have some kind of privilege, which the reality is the minute somebody assumes you have some kind of a privilege, it puts a target on your back. Whether it's money, whether it's skin color, whether it's hair texture, whatever it is, the minute somebody thinks that you either have something or perceive yourself to have something better than them in any category. And I mean, that's true everywhere in the world. I have been to the poorest countries in the world, and you can have one person that has 3 grains of rice and one that has 5, and you'll start seeing nastiness and rivalry and all sorts of hideous, unfortunate stuff. So, and also colorism exists in just about everywhere, apparently. I never saw much of it in the Bahamas. I lived in a very international environment, though. I mean, the Bahamas is a massive tourist destination, a lot of expats. My Aunt Gina, who was a beautiful black woman who was actually my mom's boss, dated a British white guy named Philip who absolutely worshipped her. It was never even mentioned. Skin color never was even mentioned as an issue. So it took going to the U.S. and kind of running into the situation there of the history of segregation, of segregated cultures, to kind of experience, oh wow, this is an issue somewhere, like a real problem. For me, being I can remember the first day of middle school, kids surrounding me and saying, "What are you?" Not "who are you?" Not "where'd you come from?" Not "oh hey, what's your name?" But "what are you?" And people would try and dress it up like, "Oh well, where are you from?" Oh, no. Where are your parents from? Like, basically trying to hint around to figure out what racial category to try and fit me into. And then you go to Miami or somewhere predominantly Hispanic, and it's just an entire nightmare of a situation, because there they think I look Hispanic, but I'm trying to hide it with a Midwestern accent, and It's not what color you are, it's who raises you and your environment that decides largely who you are, how you sound, these things. So people's insecurities kind of cover that fact up, and it turns into, well, you just think you're white. So, Haley Berry has come out and talked about it, the one drop theory. In the more Creole parts of America, essentially Louisiana, there's more of like a grading scale, more like the apartheid system that South Africa had. I think due to more French influence. I honestly don't know. I've studied it at length at one point, and I try not to think about it anymore. It's part of the reason that I left the country and stay out of it as much as possible, to be terribly honest. It took going for my master's in London and walking around and not feeling abnormal and seeing other brown people that it's so diverse there that you couldn't even bother to think about it or bother to spend the time to try and analyze the skin color or origin or ethnic background of every single person that you ran across. You would literally have no time to even go to the toilet. It's so diverse, and that's such a good thing that it's just, in so many ways, compared to the U.S., a non-issue. I guess that's hopefully going to change a lot soon. It looks very much like a biracial woman is about to marry into the royal family. That will put such a spotlight, I hope, on the issue of biraciality and what it's like in America, because I think Americans will be so excited to have someone in the royal family that it will kind of alleviate some of the negativity behind the issue itself. Again, I don't want this issue to, I try not to think about it. I try not to let it dominate my life. There's massive colorism over here. It's difficult to find something like a normal product without some kind of whitening thing in it. Perfect example. Excuse me as I struggle here. I just needed lotion. However, this is what you get when you try to buy Nivea lotion here. You get Nivea Extra White. I've seen recently Luminously White. I guess if Extra White's not white enough, you can be luminously white, maybe glow in the dark or something. I don't know. But yeah, colorism is an issue. Period. Skin bleaching is an issue. I don't know. I was raised not to care. I was raised not to even think about it. I think I asked my mother about it once. She told me, honey, you got the best of both worlds, and that was the last I really thought of it until going to the U.S. and having the experiences I had there. Essentially having to develop two different personalities, one for when I was around my white friends, and then one for when I was around my black friends. Just like Barack Obama used to change up his tone. Sometimes he sounded like just your average presidential speech, and then sometimes he'd try and kind of sound like Martin Luther King. It is what it is. I mean, it's you essentially, because you're in a segregated society, have to develop almost segregated personalities, and don't think that won't mess with you, okay? Because it took me getting to London to literally go, oh my god, it wasn't me. I was in a messed up environment. And I had all sorts of problems growing up. I had problems, as mentioned, with dating. I had problems with race coming into issues as soon as there was a problem with a friend. I can remember really my best friend ever on the planet. I upset her, and her boyfriend kind of had a little bit of a thing for me, and then that didn't work out because I couldn't stand him really, and he convinced her that I was just this toxic, horrific effect in her life. And mind you, at the time, I had just basically had a nervous breakdown. But long story short, she said to me, I remember saying, oh, so I'm just this person that used you or whatever, because I had been staying at her house. And she quite curtly looked at me and said, and I'll never forget it, stereotypes exist for a reason. And I was like, oh, so I'm just that black girl that came and, was needy and needed a place to stay and used you. And she said straight up, like, yeah, stereotypes exist for a reason. And I know she didn't really mean it in a racial way because I know her and she's just not like that. But when the chips were down, the card was there to be played if there was nothing else. So, I remember rejecting a black lesbian girl involved in the music scene in Nashville, and it turned into, oh, you think that you're too good for me, you think I'm too ghetto, it had nothing. She would follow me around to different clubs. I had to threaten to call the police on her. I mean, so and it would always boil down to a racial issue at the end. So, I mean, the last time I tried to go back to the U.S., I was sitting in a church chapel and I was talking to an African American woman who was older than me, and there was people of all different, black and white in the room, probably about 40, 50 people. And she said as loud as she could, so she made sure everybody could hear her. She said, "I'd kill every cracker in this room because a white man raped my grandmother." And that, for me, was kind of the final straw. Barack Obama had been elected to make things better. He actually made things worse. He refused to say honest but difficult things to a community that really needed to hear it. Because when you're a politician, if you want to get reelected, you say what people want to hear, not what they need to hear. So, that being said, it's gotten much worse, actually, over there. Every time I've gone back during his presidency and now post-presidency, race is just like, it is the issue on the table. I mean, from statues to the Black Lives Matter to all of it, and it's just insane. Like, it's, the progressive stack, where the person traditionally most maligned automatically has the most right to speak. It's just all a nightmare. So, and it's not just something that exists in the U.S., it's a nightmare that has spread largely and widely. I run into it with a lot of travelers over here in Southeast Asia as well. A lot of people, honestly, who I think maybe have read my blog, maybe seen my posts on Facebook, because you tend to run into more liberal types over here, people who smoke pot, more, hippie-esque, Bob Marley listening, super, super, super pro-black, anti-white privilege, anti-any kind of privilege. Well, if I've been portrayed as having some kind of privilege because of my skin color, my hair texture, whatever, then it automatically puts a target on your back. Anytime you're perceived as having privilege of any kind. And I noticed this in Miami. That's when I knew for a fact it wasn't me, because people would think I was Hispanic, and I'm not Hispanic, and they would try to get me to speak Spanish to them, and I don't speak Spanish, and muy poquito, that is about as much Spanish as I know, and hola, no habla español, that kind of thing. But people would try and straight up have conversations with me in Spanish, and then get mad at me for whitewashing away my Hispanic accent. I'm not Hispanic. And then you start seeing, the divisions within even that community, where the Cubans don't like the Puerto Ricans don't like the Mexicans, and the Mexicans, and you just start seeing it, and you know what, you just realize, after I'd been in London at that point, I had already been to school there, and I had come back, and it took me 3 days to realize, nope, wasn't me, place is still jacked up, I gotta go. So ever since about 2005, I have spent every resource I have basically trying to find different ways to teach abroad, or teach online, or work online, or do something that will afford me a life where I can still have, like my friends in the U.S., still have my contacts, still keep in contact with people, still discuss politics, still try to keep up with current events, remain relevant in the things I talk about politically about it, but other than that, trying physically to do everything besides build a boat and paddle my way out of having to live there. So hopefully things are going to get a little bit better. We possibly have one biracial person, female, who will be African American and white, I think she is, who's going to be in the royal family, and we all know what joining the royal family does to anyone. Um, I'm sure that we'll have pictures of everything she wears every day for the rest of her life, plastered everywhere, so hopefully it will make it less of an issue. Um, but outside of major cities in the U.S., it's still massive. I mean, it's unbelievable, and as far as I'm concerned, uh, getting worse. And a lot of people, being loyal patriots, don't like to hear, well, I try not to live there, and there are some attitude problems when it comes to race and all of that. I'm sorry to be the person to say it, but it's just true. And the problems exist on both sides. And I've taught, in the state of Florida, and if you want to talk about privilege, take a white child in a 95% Hispanic community and put him in a classroom of 18 where they're one and the other 17 are Hispanic, and see what kind of privilege that white kid has. Same thing in any other inner city environment in the U.S. Same thing in anywhere that's predominantly, largely still segregated by race. And what affects you most are the people closest to you. The people at your store, the people at your school, your neighbors, the people that you're surrounded by. That's what matters most. Not this big giant white power machine that everyone, constantly refers to. What matters most is, if you're a white kid going to a black school and you get your ass kicked every single day. The lead singer of Fugazi talks about it. Henry Rollins has talked about it. It's about privilege is power in numbers. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's just the reality of the situation. So it depends, on the sample size you're looking at. I don't care what your sociology teacher in 2017 tells you at any of these insane liberal screaming universities that are teaching absolute nonsense at this point. In any case, don't want to go on about it any more than that. Try to keep it as little part of my life as humanly possible, because that's what it's supposed to be, right? It's not supposed to matter. Remember, everybody, that was the point. It wasn't supposed to matter. The skin color thing, it's not supposed to be an issue. It's not supposed to be the main issue that everything revolves around, It's a pretty shallow existence if most of your life revolves around the color of your skin. And like I said, I've experienced racism in the U.S. on both sides, and I know what it's like. But I've also managed to connect with people outside of that. And if you can put that aside and try and connect with people on a human level, I think that's your best way forward as far as progress. I'm sure in 400 years it'll be much better in the U.S. Unfortunately, I don't have 400 years. I've just got this one life, so I'm trying to do the best I can with it. That said, anybody out there, few biracial people that exist in the U.S., if you have any questions, where I don't know where I've been, what I've done, how it's affected me or anything, just hit me up in any kind of comment section wherever I post this, and just keep trying to increase the peace. And it ain't all about skin color.